All right, so you have already passed the metric quiz and the other conversions quiz, and maybe you worked on 2 or more step conversions, or maybe you skipped it. It is optional after all. Some kids want to spend time on it, and other kids don't. Maybe you want to come back to it later. It doesn't matter. But before you can move on to the science math unit, you have to do the container conversions activity. So, what is that activity? It's something where you have to bring in some kind of an empty container and you use that container to answer some questions. It's pretty easy. You can do it in 10 minutes. There is one catch. The catch is if you bring in a container that I have already seen kids use before this year, you only get half a point. But if you bring in a container that I haven't seen yet this year, you get a whole point. So usually the first container I see is a pop can or maybe a water bottle because kids always have those handy. And as time goes on, if a kid wants a whole point, they'll bring in something more unusual. Like one kid used a small Altoids tin this year. So I've even seen this year I saw a perfume bottle. So what is the activity like? Well, the activity is a sheet that looks like this. And if you want a copy of this, it's over in the labs, the activity folder on the left end of the cupboards. It's the bottom one. So you get this paper and then you look at your container. So when I did this, I brought in, or I didn't actually bring it in, but I used a tube of construction adhesive. I put new siding on my house last summer, and I used this foam board adhesive stuff to put the styrofoam on underneath my insulation, underneath my siding. So if you look, watch this. Here's the tube, and what I'm after are the measurement units, and they happen to be right down here at the bottom. So it says 28 fluid ounces is 828 milliliters. So we'll see if I can remember that. But we come back to our sheet here, and we just fill it in. And so let's read through this. It says this activity is worth 1/2 a point if you bring in a container type that has already been used by someone else. This activity is worth 1 point if you bring in a container type that has not been used by someone else already. So circle one. Based on what you've seen so far, I think we're going to get 1 point for this because who else is going to bring in construction adhesive? Activity partners' names. I'm working on this alone. And you can work on this with 2 other people, 3 tops in your group. So all 3 of you can get a point. FYI, this activity must be completed before you can proceed to the math unit. And let's see, we chose to use a container of construction adhesive. For this activity. Number 4, the amount of material inside is listed in 2 different units. Yes. If you pick no for this, then you can't do this activity. You got to get something that only has, that has 2 units on it, 2 different units. And that shouldn't be hard in this country because we use old school imperial units and the metric system is all over the world. So list the 2 measurements given on the container. It was listed in, I should have put units here. List the 2 units. We've got fluid ounces and we've got milliliters. Okay, write the 2 measurements with the units as an equality. This equals that. So it was 28 fluid ounces equals, it was 828 milliliters. So 7 and 8, this is where we actually get the converting part. It says write the 2 measurements as a fraction, one on top and the other on the bottom. So I'm going to give myself some more room out here. I'm going to write 28 fluid ounces over 828 milliliters. This should look familiar to you because this is how we set up our conversion problems. Okay. Then it says write the 2 measurements as another fraction, reversed. So this time I'm going to write 828 milliliters over 28 fluid ounces. Why am I writing it both ways? Well, I'm writing it both ways because depending on what unit I want to convert, I'm going to use one fraction or the other. And remember, just as a key here, each of these 2 fractions equals the number 1. And if you multiply by the number 1, you're not changing the identity or the quantity of your answer, you're only changing the unit. Okay, so once you get to this far, you bring this paper to me, and I make up two random numbers. So I might pick 0.15 fluid ounces, and I'm going to have you switch that to milliliters. And then I might pick, I don't know, 172.6 milliliters, and you're going to switch that to fluid ounces. So after you bring the paper to me and I write this stuff right here, then you solve these two problems, and then once I grade it, you get your point, and you can move on to the math unit. So I'm going to do these two. I'm going to do this one here, and I'm going to do this one here. So I made up this number, 0.15 fluid ounces. And remember from that other quiz, the other conversions quiz, it's a good idea to put that over 1. And I'm going to multiply by a fraction that's going to let me cancel out fluid ounces. So that means I'm going to use the fraction that has fluid ounces on the bottom, and that is this one. So I'm going to write 828 milliliters on top and 28 fluid ounces on the bottom. And that is going to let me cancel out my fluid ounces because it's on top and bottom. So what math do I have to do? I've just got to multiply across the top and then divide by the bottom. Well, that's a huge calculator. Okay, so I've got my 0.15 times 828 equals, and then divided by 28, and I get 4.43. I'm just going to call that 4.4. So I've got for my answer 4.4 what? Milliliters. So there's one down, and now I'm going to do the other one. So for the other problem I made up, I'm going to start with my 172.6 milliliters. I'm going to put it over 1 just because that's a good habit. And I'm going to multiply by a fraction that lets me cancel out milliliters. And that is going to be this one because milliliters is on the bottom. So I'm going to write my 28 fluid ounces on top here and my 828 milliliters on the bottom. And why did I do that? Because that lets me cancel out my milliliters. And what math do I have to do then? I bring back my enormous calculator here, and I go 172.6 times 28 equals, and then divided by 828, and I get 5.83. Whoa, I get 5.8 something. I'm just going to call that 5.8. So 5.8 what? That's fluid ounces. So there we go. We've got our two answers boxed here. You give me this paper, and then you can, once I grade it, you can enter the science math unit. There you go.